The first time a woman bled, she did not scream, she did not faint. She looked down, and she understood. The blood was not a wound, it was a rhythm, a cycle that arrived with the moon and departed with the same quiet certainty. But what happened next, how she managed that blood for the next 4 days, was a problem that every culture on Earth had to solve. There were no pads, no tampons, no painkillers. Just what the land, the body, and the minds of her people could provide, and the solutions they found were ingenious, disgusting, sacred, and sometimes horrifying. Long before writing, before cities, before agriculture, women already bled, and they already managed it. The earliest menstrual products were the simplest: a handful of soft, absorbent moss, a wad of grass, a scrap of animal fur. Women in the Paleolithic gathered these materials, used them, and discarded them far from camp, where the smell would not attract predators. Some hunter-gatherer women likely free-bled, letting the blood run down their legs, which was practical in warm climates where clothing was minimal. The blood dried, flaked, and was washed away at the nearest stream. There was no shame. The band was small. Everyone knew when a woman was bleeding, and it was simply part of the rhythm of life. In ancient Egypt, women had access to one of the world's first absorbent materials, the Nile reed. But the true breakthrough was softened papyrus. Women would take strips of papyrus, soak them in water until they were pliable, and roll them into a tampon-like shape. These were inserted to absorb the flow. The Egyptians also used lint wrapped around a small stick, a precursor to the modern tampon applicator, thousands of years before Tampax. The hieroglyphs are silent on the subject, but medical papyri like the Ebers Papyrus contain references to drawing out blood, and they describe vaginal suppositories made from honey, natron, and ground plants. These were not contraceptives. They were menstrual aids, used to ease pain and control flow. Whether they worked is another question. But the women of the Nile were not passive sufferers. They were active managers of their own bodies. The Greeks took a more philosophical view. They believed menstruation was the body's way of expelling excess blood, which women accumulated because they were colder and moister than men. Aristotle wrote that menstrual blood was the material from which a baby was formed, the woman providing the substance, the man providing the soul. But practical management was less poetic. Greek women used soft wool, wrapped around a small piece of wood or ivory, as an internal product. The Romans had access to sea sponges, the same sponges they used to wipe themselves in the latrine. A woman could insert a small, clean sea sponge on a string, wring it out, rinse it, and reuse it throughout her cycle. It was the most reusable, sustainable menstrual product in history, and it worked. Wealthy women also had access to linen pads, which were washed and reused. The poor used rags, grass, or nothing at all. In every Roman city, there was a corner of the marketplace where a woman could buy a fresh sponge, a bundle of wool, or a small clay pot of herbal salve for cramps. The trade was quiet, but it was everywhere. In many ancient cultures, menstruation was not just a physical event, it was a spiritual one. The blood was powerful, dangerous even. In parts of Africa, the Americas, and ancient Israel, menstruating women were required to separate themselves from the community. They lived in special huts, away from men, away from children, away from the food supply. The seclusion was not always a punishment, sometimes it was a retreat. Women bled together, rested together, and told stories. The hut was a place of female knowledge, away from the demands of daily life. But it could also be a place of exile, and the stigma of impurity clung to the blood for millennia. By the medieval period, the most common menstrual product in Europe was the rag, a strip of old cloth, folded and held in place by a belt. Women called them clouts, or napkins. They were washed, dried in secret, and reused. The wealthy had dedicated menstrual aprons, lined with layers of absorbent fabric. The poor made do with whatever they had. Pain relief came from herbal teas, willow bark for the cramps, chamomile for the mood, feverfew for the headache. Some women prayed to Saint Margaret, the patron saint of childbirth and women's health. Others simply endured, working the fields, kneading the bread, and nursing the babies while their bodies bled. There was no sick leave, no sympathy, just the quiet, relentless rhythm of the month. In some cultures, menstrual blood was sacred. It was used in fertility rituals, smeared on doorposts for protection, or mixed with soil to bless the crops. In others, it was cursed. A menstruating woman could not touch a weapon, could not enter a temple, could not prepare food. The blood itself was thought to spoil wine, curdle milk, and dull iron. These beliefs were not fringe. They were central to the way ancient people understood the world, and they shaped the way women lived within it. Next time you walk down the pharmacy aisle, remember the moss, the sponge, the papyrus tampon. Remember the seclusion hut and the linen clout? The women of the ancient world were not silent victims. They were practical, resourceful, and tougher than we can imagine. They managed the same monthly rhythm that we do without a single modern product, without a single word of encouragement from the culture around them. They just got on with it, and they always had.